Today we're going to talk about managing the art of the tough conversation. And so as we're doing that, what I would like you to do is to begin by thinking about a particular tough conversation that you either need to have or have had in the past and it did not go the way that you wanted. Because all the tools and techniques that we're going to go through today will be much more helpful for you if you can really think of a real scenario that you would want to apply the tools in. So it could be a conversation you need to have with your boss. It often is. It could be a conversation you need to be having with a peer, or maybe it's even a conversation that you're having in some area of your personal life where having a deliberate, focused approach would make an impact. Through today, we're going to be talking about how do you begin with balanced intentions of where you're coming from in the conversation, going in and setting clear expectations, having skilled discussions, and we'll give you some techniques to have more skilled discussions, and how to customize the interventions for your tough conversation depending on who you're speaking with. So we're talking about balanced intentions. The Winning Well model, so our book is Winning Well, Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. And part of the not losing your soul process is really being very grounded in your own personal values and where you're coming from. And so we talk a lot about the importance of coming from a place of confidence and humility and balancing those. And so what do I mean when we talk about confidence, and how did I really come to learn about that? Now, this is a picture of me, and anybody, if you've seen the advertisement, you're going to say, oh, well, she hasn't aged a bit in 20 years. But this is from a picture of me 20 years ago with my son, Ben. Just been promoted to my very first executive job in human resources. And all of the players were new because it was concurrent with a merger at Verizon. And so I had a new boss, and there were new C-level people to get to know. And because life is also sometimes messy, I was going through a divorce. Timing could not have been worse. Worried about the optics, and I did not tell a single human being. I told my boss, I did not tell my peers, and I just showed up and kept doing what I was doing. And one of my very first assignments was to build a diversity strategy for the new corporation. And so I was given a group of people from across the company to work with. So we had managers of various levels of the business from various departments of different race, age, gender, sexual orientation. It was a very, very diverse group. And I thought we were doing such an amazing job because I was really, really working hard to pull out people's personal stories and personal examples and to make sure that we use that to inform our strategy. One day, a really bright African-American woman named Sharika burst into my office, and she said, "Girl, fraud." Now, what she was talking about. But I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I came by your office the other day to drop off some papers, and there are pictures all over your desk of you and a little boy and no man. You are a single mother." Under normal circumstances, this would not have been that big of a deal, but the problem was I had been every month sitting in a conference room in Manhattan with people and encouraging them to tell their stories and explain how they've been discriminated and to make sure that we incorporated all that into this diversity strategy. And not once did I mention, while we were having all these in-depth conversations about what we needed to do to support single mothers, not once did I say, hey, you know what? When we talk about single mothers, it's not just service reps and call centers who need help and flexible hours with daycare. It's a corporate executive who is terrified to be who she is at work for fear that she'll be discriminated against. If we're not talking about that, we're not building a solid diversity strategy. And I learned right there that one of the most important things about leadership and having the tough conversation, and that the toughest conversation that you may ever have is the one that you must have with yourself. I needed to get my head straight that, yes, I could show up who I was and bring that to the table and still be a competent leader. And in that context, hiding that information was actually not humble at all. It was a lack of confidence that was making us have a less than ideal conversation and a less than ideal diversity strategy. So really, when you're having a tough conversation and you're with other people, getting a good sense of where your head is, and are you really putting the best interests of the business and the best interests of the relationship at heart, or are you in some way protecting yourself and afraid to have the conversation with yourself? Confidence. So what does confidence look like? Confidence is having an audacious vision. It's being willing to stand up for what matters, willing to speak the truth. And in our book, we go into a lot of detail of how do you build confidence in yourself and in other people. The side of that, though, is confidence without humility. What if you have someone who's very, very confident, but they're not humble? Extremely destructive when you're trying to have a tough conversation as well. And so, I was working with a group of managers, and there were about 12 of them, and they were going through one of our really in-depth Winning Well boot camps, and we had gone through a lot of skills, and they were all based on the confident humility model. And this man who had been just a rock star the entire time, he was from Serbia, and there were some other people from Serbia in the workshop who were having a little bit trouble understanding some of the words that I was using, and he was taking time to help them and translate them. When we were working on our action learning projects, he was stepping up to a leadership role. He was an incredibly impressive man. He raised his hand and he said, you know, I've been thinking about this, Karin, throughout this workshop, and nobody does this confident humility thing better than my wife. Well, tell me, he said, a couple of years ago, I was really going through a very, very hard time, and I was just such a jerk. I mean, if you looked up bad husbands in Wikipedia, I'm pretty sure my picture would have been there. He said, I was depressed. I wasn't happy at work. We didn't have enough money to do things we wanted to do. And she didn't say much. But one day she said, look, I know things are not going well. Would you be willing to wake up with me next Tuesday at 3 a.m., I have a surprise. Now, I was scared, but I knew I was being a jerk, so I said, all right, fine, yeah, whatever. So the day came, and she woke me up, and I rolled over and said, no, I don't want to do this. And she said, you promised. Blindfolded me and drove me out to go on my #1 bucket list adventure, was to go skydiving. Knew we could not afford this, and she knew we could not afford this, but somehow she pulled it off. And as I got onto the wing of that airplane, I thought, I could feel the wind blowing against my face. I could feel the exhilaration coming up, and I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, that feeling of being alive. And that night over a beer, we were taking a look at the pictures, and she had taken some video. Said, this is what I love. Again, I don't know what it's going to take, but we got to get him back.